Last Sunday, I gave each of you an invitation. And does anyone remember that? If you weren't here and you didn't watch me on YouTube, you wouldn't. But I gave you an invitation in your mind, in my mind, and it was an envelope. It was a beautiful linen, beige, cream-colored envelope with gold embossed upon it. And when you opened that envelope, you found an invitation. An invitation in gold also that said, you are cordially invited to let 2024 to be the year that you awaken, truly awaken to the life of beauty and wonder that Spirit holds for you and intends for you. And I asked a question last Sunday, and I'm going to ask it again this week. What would happen if you RSVP'd yes to that invitation? What would happen? Would 2024 bring you to a state of feeling fully awakened and aware for the presence of so much good? Meaning fully awake and present to the life you are now living, and fully and awake to the present, to whom you are in every moment. Fully and awake to the presence, to what brings you joy and love in the here and the now. And fully awake and present to the life that you are creating. We're always creating in our life. And that means with every thought you think, with every emotion you feel, and with every word that you speak, you are creating. Because we are creative beings. And today I want to add another question to that list. What would 2024, I love saying that word, I love 2024 already. More of everything in 24, right? More love, more joy, more health, more wealth, everything in the more, because we can create that, and we do create that, whether consciously or by default. So I want to add to that list then. What would 2024 be like if your heart were fully open and awake to the presence of grace? What would 2024 be like if grace was truly in your life? And what do we, by grace, we mean? What would it be like? And we're gonna, well, forget that. We're gonna come back to that question at the very end, but just think about that for a moment. If we awaken to all the good, to the grace, which we're gonna really delve into, because I've had people ask me, what is grace really? You know, it's one of those esoteric words, but we try to answer it in our limited vocabulary, but we do try to answer it more, and as deeper we go in meditation, we feel it. So there was a 5-year-old who said grace at the family dinner one night in the following way. Dear God, thank you for all these pancakes. When he concluded, his parents asked him why he thanked God for pancakes, because they were having spaghetti. So clearly, they were not pancakes. But he smiled and he said, I thought I would see if he were paying attention. If God is paying attention to what we truly ask for. So here's the deal. Today we are not going to talk about that kind of grace that we say before a meal, but I want you to know that God is always, in all ways, paying attention to our every thought, our every word, and our every emotion. And paying attention is through that law. It's not like this God that's up there listening to everything we're saying. I mean, that was the old religion. The new religion is all non-locality. So it is all happening at the same time. The law is responding to us as we think, feel, and speak, and act. It is responding to all of that. And likewise, and relevant and important to this conversation today is God's grace is always present. And we can experience a life of beauty and wonder with that grace of God. But that, of course, leads us to the question, what really is grace? What does it mean? And more particularly, what does it mean for you? Because that's the important thing. I can stand here and speak all kinds of words, but what does it resonate? What does it mean deep within you? It is my prayer and intention that today we leave here with a more personal and more awakened view of what grace and what God means in an awakened state to us. So in my religious upbringing, we were taught about the grace of God. I was told that I was living a life of grace, meaning that I was secure in and supported by the arms of God, and that I was immersed and surrounded by the love of God. And today, my theology, religious science, it's my theology of choice, I totally concur with that, believe that 100%. I believe I am living in the state of grace. I really do believe that I am secure and supported by the metaphysical arms of God. I believe that I am immersed in and surrounded by the love of God. I really feel that. I'm sure a lot of you do also. And I say yes, yes to all of that. So does Ernest Holmes. At page 50, he writes what it does. And we know it in Ernest Holmes is always about the divine. It's about God. So he writes this: here and now we are surrounded by and immersed in an infinite good. How much of this infinite good is ours? All of it. All of it is ours. So I want you to repeat this after me. Here and now.
Here and now.
I am surrounded by.
I am surrounded by.
And immersed in.
And immersed in.
An infinite good.
An infinite good.
Here and now.
Here and now.
I live God's grace.
I live God's grace.
So, however, this is the however, in my religious upbringing of the past, something else came along with that idea of this loving, graceful God. And the one that I was secure in and supported by, and I love that whole concept. It was a bit of a double-edged sword, if you will. Along with those ideas, also came the idea that I didn't actually deserve this grace, that it was completely unmerited. I was told that as a sinful human being, because we're all born in sin, no, we're not. But this is then. I could not possibly merit or deserve the grace of God because I was so flawed. And I could never earn it because I was never good enough. Yeah? Anyone else was told that? Maybe. Imagine telling that to a child. Come on. Anyway, that was part of my religious upbringing, and I now say, no way, absolutely not. That is not correct. I could never believe that then. I would never believe that now. No. And I would tell that, and I have told that to children. Rather, I believe at the very core of my being that God's grace is now and forever freely given. Freely given. It does not have to be deserved, merited, or earned. It is there by our birthright. The grace of God flows through us. It is us. And all of those beautiful gifts that come with it are there. In the philosophy of Ernest Holmes, it says, Grace is the givingness of life, and that certainly is given automatically. And in the science of mind, grace is the givingness of spirit to its creations. And we are the creations of the divine. That infinite energy, that incredible consciousness that we call God, is the truth of our very being. Each and every one of us, no one left out. Cannot be. Can't be one and no one else. So these words of Ernest Holmes are also found in Scripture. If you read them, which we will be doing, I guess I might be taking that class, we will be doing on Tuesday night at the wonderful class, Mitch Austin's class on the Bible, metaphysical parables of the Bible and interpretations on Zoom. But here's one of the Psalms at 45:2. Grace is poured upon your lips. Therefore, God has blessed you forever. I don't hear anything about less than there. And the Apostle Paul wrote, by grace you have been saved through faith. And this is not your own doing, it is the gift of God, and not because of any work. You don't have to do anything. You just have to open your heart for it, of course. If you don't open up your heart to receive it, which we'll talk about, then you can't receive it. But it is always present, it is always there. It is part of the gifts that this infinite energy has bestowed upon us. So we could say that grace is God's divine love, freely given to all. God's eternal protection, freely given to all. God's ever-present blessings, freely given to all. And God's complete givingness, freely bestowed upon all. God's gift of absolute favor, freely given to all. Freely given to all. These are all ways to define God's grace in our life. Inadequate, as I said, they might be. It is our attempt to try to describe this infinite, glorious, beautiful energy consciousness that we call the divine, we call God. And you caught, I know, at the very end of each and every one of those statements was freely given to all. Don't have to earn it. There's nothing to earn, only to be open and receptive to receive. Grace as divine love. Grace as God's eternal protection. Grace as God's ever-present blessings. Grace as God's complete givingness. And grace as absolute favor. It's all working through us. It is always working through us constantly. You do not have to earn grace. It is not something that is paid out only to the good or deserving. Grace is not something to work for. You don't have to work for it. You don't have to even develop it or build it up or cultivate it. It simply is. It is like any of the spiritual or natural laws. They simply are, but are we using them? That's the question we ask ourselves. Am I open and receptive? Am I using this gift of grace, the givingness of God, of all good, into our lives? And we receive it simply because of who we are. Ernest Holmes tells us again, page 430, God loves all alike and causes the rain to fall and the sun to shine alike upon all. In arms which are all inclusive, divine love encompasses everything. Absolutely amazing and beautiful. In the arms which are all inclusive, divine love is freely given and encompasses everything. Just breathe that in for a minute. Because it really is profound. We need to know that we are so worthy, of all this good. We are more than worthy. It is our birthright. It is a gift we have been given as we came into this world, and it will always be with us. So to me, that was all the definition of grace. So if grace is freely bestowed upon us, why don't we necessarily feel and experience it? The answer to that is really quite simple. A lot of people say, yeah, it's the givingness of God. I got the whole definition, but I don't feel a thing. We must receive it, number one. We must receive it. We must accept it. We must open our hearts and our minds to it. We can just spout out all these phrases, all these beautiful words, but are we really embodying the definition of grace, of love, of beauty, of all of those glorious gifts? We must receive it, and our minds must be open to this divine grace in order for us to really let it have its way with us, and we want it to have its way with us. Author Philip Yancey wrote this: grace is a free gift, but to receive the gift, you have to have your hands open. And a lot of people don't have their hands open. At his rational best, Holmes wrote this is in 1926, original Science of Mind book, before it was altered. Grace is not something, this is Holmes, God imposed upon us, but is the logical result of the correct acceptance of life and a correct relationship to the Spirit. He was very intellectual. And then Ramakrishna, an Indian mystic and yogi during the 19th century, said the same thing but a little bit more poetically. The waves of grace are blowing by all the time. All we have to do is raise our sails. We have to open our hands to receive. The gift cannot be given if we don't open to receive. And then we just raise our sail, and we just float around in that sea of good, that sea of grace. A great devotee of Krishna, this is a really good Hindu story. So a great devotee of Krishna was once challenged by some powerful men in his village who didn't believe that Krishna was God. And they said to him, "Prove to us that Krishna is God." They looked around and saw one of their most sacred animals that was lying dead on the road, and said to the devotee, "Through the power of Krishna, make this dead cow come back to life." The devotee replied, "This is no problem for Krishna, but give me 3 days." He spent the next 3 days in agonizing prayer, praying night and day and night, praying to Krishna to bring this cow back to life. And each hour that passed, that cow just lay dead in the road. And he got more and more nervous because now 3 days was coming to a close. And finally, at the 11th hour, the cow came back to life. And all the villagers rejoiced and believed that Krishna is God. The devotee, of course, is grateful and believed, but a short time later he became very depressed and sad. And Krishna came to him and asked him why he was so sad. "Lord, why did you make me work so hard to I got so desperate to bring that cow back to life immediately. Why didn't you just do that?" And smiling, Krishna said, "It is you who gave me 3 days. The universe doesn't know time and space. We do. And so we create those limitations in our lives. He created this 3 days when it could have been done automatically." So Ernest Holmes writes about that too. He writes about everything. The only reason, he says, we are limited is that we have not allowed the divine within us to more completely express. How much life can we experience? As much as we can embody. We grow in grace, as it were. We grow in power. But right today, we can expect to demonstrate or to have our prayers answered according to our belief and the embodiment of that belief. How deep is your belief? That will always come down to it. In the book of Awakening by Mark Napo, he writes, each person is born with an unencumbered spot, free of expectation and regret, free of ambition and embarrassment, free of fear and worry, an umbilical spot of grace, where we were each first touched by God. So pretty. It is the spot of grace that theologians call it the soul. Jung calls it the seat of the unconscious. Hindu masters call it Atman. The Buddhists call it Dharma. Rilke calls it an inwardness. And the Sufis call it Qalb. Calm. And Jesus called it the center of our love. To know this spot, this is still in, to know this spot of grace is to know who we are. Not by surface markers of identity, not by where we work or what we wear, not by how we would like to be addressed, but by feeling our place in relation to the infinite and by inhabiting it. God's grace is like a vast ocean. We can sit on the shore and collect shells. We can go further still and catch a fish. Or we can dive deep and bring back a pearl. The choice is always ours. All of these things are always present. And so I ask you I go back to that question that I asked at the very beginning. What would 2024 be like if our hearts were fully open to receive, if they were awakened and fully blessed to the presence of God's love and God's grace in our lives? What would it look like? And so right now I want us to take a breath. I'm going to do a very, very short little prayer. For all of us for this year of 2024, where we experience more of God's grace, more of God's love, more of the very beingness of the infinite wisdom and clarity and direction that comes from this beautiful intelligence, this intelligence that runs through all it creates, this beauty, the grace of the divine that is present in all creation, all creation. The fullness of God is for each and every one to turn within and claim for themselves, to believe in themselves, to believe and awaken to the grace of God that's the good of their lives. Always giving more good and more good, nothing other than good. I am so deeply grateful to speak this word today, to speak of the grace of God, to start this new year with the full expectation of more of that grace, more of that good, because my heart and each one's heart here is fully open to receive. We put our hands out and we say, yes, thank you. Yes, I receive. And we give great deep thanks for that receiving and giving. It is all the same thing. It is the love of God expressing in, through, and as us, in this moment and in every moment. And so it is.
So it is.
Just breathe that in. You don't even have to clap. Just breathe that in.